Somewhere beneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean right now, a fish is hunting in absolute darkness. It has never seen sunlight because sunlight has never reached the world it calls home. It follows the pressure waves left behind by other animals, moving through a place that has remained remarkably stable for millions of years. That world exists inside the largest ocean on Earth. The Pacific covers 165 million square kilometers, which is about 63.7 million square miles, nearly one-third of the planet's entire surface. Most of it has never been seen directly by human eyes. The familiar blue surface is only the beginning. Beneath it lies a descent of almost 11 kilometers, that is nearly 7 miles, where every layer changes the rules of life. A fish lives here with a transparent dome instead of a solid skull, its eyes rotating inside its own head as it searches the darkness above. Another predator is not a single animal at all, but thousands of identical clones fused into one living hunter stretching more than 40 meters, that is nearly 131 feet, through the water. Another fish begins reproduction by biting into its mate until two separate bodies become one for the rest of their lives. The Pacific does not become emptier as you descend. It becomes more specialized, more extreme, and more unfamiliar with every layer. Tonight, we're descending through the largest and least explored ocean on Earth, following the evidence from the sunlit surface to the deepest place life has ever been found. If you are settling in for this one, consider leaving a like and subscribing before we begin. It really does help the channel grow. And let me know in the comments, is it already late where you are, or is your day only just getting started? Now, let's leave the surface behind and discover why the Pacific becomes more extraordinary the deeper you go. The change begins without a sound, without a visible boundary, and without any sign to those drifting above. Water remains water, stretching outward in every direction with the same gentle motion. Yet beneath that familiar surface lies an invisible frontier resting at roughly 200 meters, which is about 656 feet. Crossing it means leaving behind the final reach of the sun forever. The fading is not gradual in the way evening settles across a landscape. With each descent through clear Pacific water, the remaining sunlight weakens by roughly a factor of 10 every 75 meters, which is about 246 feet. Colors disappear one after another until the last measurable trace of natural light is gone. Beyond 200 meters, which is about 656 feet, no sunrise has ever arrived. No season has ever brightened the water. The darkness below has endured for as long as the Pacific itself has existed. For nearly every living thing across Earth's surface, energy begins with sunlight. Forests, grasslands, coral reefs, insects crossing the air, birds riding warm currents, and fish weaving through shallow lagoons all depend upon the ancient partnership between light and photosynthesis. Green organisms gather sunlight and transform it into food, creating the foundation upon which almost every familiar ecosystem rests. It is a chain so complete that it can seem almost universal. Then the chain simply ends. Below this depth, the great engine that powers the surface world no longer reaches. Every creature continuing downward enters an environment where survival cannot depend upon the daily arrival of daylight. Evolution has spent millions upon millions of years solving this single problem, shaping bodies and behaviors that belong entirely to a world separated from the sky. The water itself changes as well. A region known as the thermocline forms a powerful dividing layer, where temperatures can fall from around 20 degrees Celsius or 68 degrees Fahrenheit to about 5 degrees Celsius or 41 degrees Fahrenheit across only a few hundred meters of descent. Warm surface currents and the colder depths exchange remarkably little with one another. The Pacific becomes divided into neighboring worlds that touch yet remain profoundly different. Just beneath this transition often lies another hidden boundary, the oxygen minimum zone. Here, dissolved oxygen falls to concentrations that would overwhelm many animals accustomed to the surface. Fish, crustaceans, and countless other familiar species struggle to survive if drawn into these waters for long. Yet for organisms shaped by countless generations within this environment, the reduced oxygen is neither unusual nor hostile. It is simply the condition under which life has always unfolded. Scarcity begins to govern every movement. Food arrives only in scattered fragments descending from far above, and every meal carries extraordinary value. Growth slows, encounters become uncommon, energy is spent with remarkable care, measured against an environment where waste can rarely be afforded. Time itself seems to stretch beneath these conditions, as though life has adjusted its rhythm to match the steady pace of the deep ocean. This unseen frontier marks the first true transformation of the Pacific. Above it, the familiar rules of the surface continue beneath the warmth of daylight. Below it, another biological history has unfolded in complete separation, shaped by enduring darkness, persistent cold, diminishing oxygen, and the patient passage of geological ages. Every remarkable organism found farther below begins with this single crossing, where the influence of the sun ends and an entirely different version of life quietly takes its place. Darkness did not end the story of vision in the Pacific. Instead, it inspired life to create its own stars, each one carried within a living body. Across the immense water below the reach of the sun, brief flashes appear, vanish, answer one another, and disappear again, forming a language written in living light rather than spoken sound. Between roughly 80 and 90% of creatures living deeper than 200 meters, which is about 656 feet, possess the remarkable ability to generate their own glow. This illumination comes from carefully controlled biochemical reactions that release almost no heat, making them extraordinarily efficient. Every pulse preserves precious energy while producing enough brightness to alter the outcome of a meeting between hunter and hunted. To an observer from the surface, such displays might seem graceful, almost decorative. Yet beauty is only a consequence of function. Every spark exists because it improved the chances that its owner would survive long enough to reproduce. Across millions upon millions of years, natural selection refined these living lanterns into instruments of deception, concealment, communication, and defense, until light itself became one of the most valuable resources in an ocean where sunlight never returns. One of the most elegant strategies is known as counter-illumination. Many fishes and squid possess rows of specialized light-producing organs across the underside of their bodies. These organs emit a glow, matching the faint trace of light filtering downward from the distant surface. A predator searching upward expects to find a dark outline against the dim brightness above. Instead, the animal erases its own silhouette, blending so precisely into the background that it becomes remarkably difficult to distinguish from the water surrounding it. Elsewhere, light becomes a lure. Certain predators extend modified spines or flexible appendages tipped with glowing tissue. The moving point resembles a much smaller animal drifting through the water. Curious prey approaches what appears to be an easy meal, only to discover the glow belongs to something waiting with open jaws. In a realm where opportunities for feeding are uncertain, even a small advantage can determine whether another day begins. Some gelatinous animals employ a completely different tactic. When seized by a predator, They release an intense burst of brilliant light into the surrounding water. The display does not help them escape directly. Instead, it attracts larger hunters from nearby. The original attacker suddenly risks becoming prey itself, often loosening its grip during the confusion. A single flash can reverse the balance of danger within moments. Light also serves companionship. Among several deep water fishes, distinctive glowing patterns line the body like carefully arranged constellations. Each species carries its own arrangement, allowing individuals to recognize suitable mates within a vast landscape where encounters are uncommon. The darkness conceals almost everything except the signals evolution has deemed essential. More than 3/4 of all deep-sea fishes are believed to produce their own light in one form or another. The twilight waters of the Pacific are therefore never truly empty of illumination. Countless faint glows drift through the immense water column, crossing unseen paths, fading, returning, and overlapping in every direction. Each flash marks a decision, a warning, an invitation, or an attempt to remain unnoticed by another watching pair of eyes. This exchange has continued for hundreds of millions of years, reaching back long before forests spread across continents or many familiar land animals appeared. Every improvement in producing light encouraged another improvement in detecting it. Better disguises inspired sharper vision. More convincing lures encouraged greater caution. Generation after generation, the balance shifted without ever settling, until the darkness itself became filled with countless living signals, each carrying the memory of an ancient evolutionary contest still unfolding beneath the Pacific today. Among the countless inhabitants of the Pacific twilight waters, one small fish carries perhaps the clearest reminder that evolution does not preserve familiar designs. It reshapes them whenever survival demands something new, even if the result appears almost impossible to reconcile with every expectation formed at the surface. The barreleye fish, known scientifically as Macropinna microstoma, measures only about 15 centimeters in length, which is about 6 inches. It spends its life between depths of roughly 200 meters, which is about 656 feet, and 1,000 meters, which is about 3,281 feet. Within this vast layer of dim water, its body tells two very different stories. From behind, it resembles an ordinary fish with delicate fins and a narrow tail built for careful movement through open water. From the front, nearly every familiar feature gives way to something altogether different. Where a solid skull might be expected, the barreleye possesses a transparent dome filled with clear fluid. This delicate covering arches smoothly over the brain and eyes, forming a living window, unlike anything found in most other vertebrates. The tissue is so remarkably transparent that researchers observing healthy individuals through remotely operated cameras could see directly into the fish's head while it moved through its natural surroundings. The true eyes are not located where they first appear to be. The pair of dark spots near the front of the head resemble ordinary fish eyes, yet they serve an entirely different purpose. They are organs responsible for detecting chemical traces drifting through the water, guiding the animal towards scents carried by slow currents. The actual eyes rest much farther back, enclosed beneath the transparent dome. These eyes are long, tubular structures, colored a vivid green by specialized pigments that help filter unwanted light. For much of the time they point upward, searching for the faint outlines of drifting prey passing between the barreleye and the distant surface. Against the dim glow filtering from far above, even the smallest silhouette can become visible if the visual system is sensitive enough. The remarkable design does not end there. The eyes are capable of rotating within the protective dome. While scanning overhead, they remain directed upward, When prey has been located and captured, the eyes swing forward, allowing the fish to judge distance and guide its movements with remarkable precision. Few vertebrates possess anything approaching this degree of visual flexibility, and even fewer carry their entire optical system inside a transparent chamber. For decades, scientists knew only fragments of this extraordinary anatomy. The species was first described during the 1939. Specimens collected from deep water consistently arrived at the surface with the transparent dome destroyed. The rapid reduction in pressure during ascent caused the fragile tissue to collapse before researchers ever examined the animal. Museums around the world preserved incomplete examples without realizing that one of the most distinctive structures had vanished before observation even began. More than 60 years passed before advanced underwater cameras finally revealed the living fish exactly where it belonged. During the early years of the 21st century, researchers watched healthy barreleyes moving through the Pacific, their transparent domes perfectly intact and their eyes rotating beneath the clear covering. A body plan that had remained hidden despite decades of careful study suddenly appeared complete. The barreleye is far more than an unusual curiosity. It demonstrates how profoundly the deep Pacific can reshape a familiar blueprint. Given enough time beneath fading light and relentless environmental pressure, even the fundamental architecture of a vertebrate head can be rewritten into a form that seems almost unimaginable from the perspective of the world above. As daylight fades across the Pacific, an immense ascent begins beneath the waves. It unfolds beyond every horizon, hidden beneath the changing colors of evening, involving countless living creatures that begin rising together through the water column. No surface ripple reveals it. No passing vessel can witness its full extent, yet this movement has repeated with remarkable consistency for millions upon millions of years. Fishes, squid, jellyfish, crustaceans, and innumerable smaller drifting animals leave the deeper waters as darkness settles overhead. They climb through distances ranging from roughly 200 meters, which is about 656 feet, to 1,000 meters, which is about 3,281 feet. Their destination is the richer feeding grounds nearer the surface, where microscopic life flourishes beneath the influence of sunlight that never reaches the depths they normally inhabit. Before dawn returns, the migration reverses. The same travelers begin descending once more. Abandoning the upper waters before growing daylight makes them easier for larger predators to detect. They return to colder depths, carrying within their bodies the nourishment gathered during the brief hours above. Every evening begins an ascent. Every morning completes the descent. The rhythm has become as dependable as the turning of the planet itself. Marine scientists know this extraordinary event as the daily vertical migration. Although individual animals may appear small, together they form one of the largest biological movements ever recorded. The total mass involved rivals the greatest migrations across the continents, where vast herds cross open grasslands in search of fresh grazing. The difference is that this migration unfolds through 3 dimensions rather than across a landscape, extending upward and downward through an immense column of seawater. Its sheer density once puzzled researchers studying the ocean with sound. Early echo-sounding instruments frequently detected what appeared to be a solid boundary suspended far above the seafloor. This mysterious layer reflected sound waves so effectively that operators believed they had discovered a false bottom beneath their vessels. Only later did scientists realize the apparent boundary was not rock or sediment, but an immense concentration of living animals moving together through the water as one vast community. The journey serves another purpose, extending far beyond feeding alone. Every creature returning to the depths carries with it energy originally captured near the surface through photosynthesis. Organic material consumed in the upper ocean becomes muscle, tissue, and stored nutrients before descending once again into the darker layers. In this way, life itself transports nourishment downward, linking distant regions of the Pacific that never exchange sunlight directly. Researchers estimate that this migration moves tens of millions of tons of carbon into the deep Pacific each year. Rather than remaining near the surface, carbon becomes incorporated into living bodies that descend daily into colder water, where much of it remains for extended periods before entering other stages of the marine food web. The movement of these countless animals therefore influences not only deep ocean ecosystems but also the global cycling of carbon across the planet. Each individual traveler follows simple biological needs, yet together they create an immense procession extending across entire ocean basins. Countless generations have inherited this behavior without interruption, guided by changing levels of light rather than landmarks or familiar coastlines. Long before human beings first crossed the Pacific, long before written history, this immense exchange between upper and lower waters had already settled into its enduring rhythm. The migration continues tonight, exactly as it has for ages beyond memory, concealed beneath the surface, where daylight never reveals its full magnitude. The Pacific appears unchanged from above, while beneath it an entire living world rises and falls with the turning of every single day. Imagine encountering a living body whose parts cannot survive on their own, yet none of those parts alone can truly be called the animal. Drifting through the Pacific twilight waters is an organism that stretches the meaning of individuality until familiar definitions begin to lose their shape. The siphonophore appears at first glance to be a single, elongated creature moving with graceful purpose through the water. In reality, it begins life as one tiny larva that grows by producing countless genetically identical copies of itself. These copies remain permanently attached, developing into highly specialized structures known as zooids. Every zooid shares the same genetic identity, yet each matures into a different biological role, surrendering independence so the colony can exist as something far greater than any one of its parts. Some zooids become swimming bells. Their only purpose is movement. They contract in coordinated pulses, pushing the colony forward through the immense water column. They cannot capture food or reproduce. They exist solely to propel the larger body with remarkable efficiency, their rhythmic contractions carrying every other member of the colony through an environment where energy must never be wasted. Other zooids become feeding polyps. These specialized members bear tentacles equipped with microscopic stinging cells capable of immobilizing passing prey. Once captured, the food is digested and nutrients are distributed throughout the colony by an interconnected internal canal system. The feeding zooids cannot swim, yet they nourish every other part, including the swimming bells that brought them into contact with food in the first place. Still, other zooids become reproductive structures, responsible for producing the next generation when conditions allow. Defensive zooids guard vulnerable regions of the colony, while additional specialized forms perform tasks that no ordinary animal divides among separate bodies. Each individual component sacrifices versatility in exchange for extraordinary efficiency. Alone, none could survive. Together, they become one functioning organism with capabilities impossible for any single zooid to achieve. Among the largest representatives is Praia dubia, a giant siphonophore inhabiting the deep Pacific. It can exceed 40 meters in length, which is about 131 feet, making it longer than even the largest blue whale. Despite this astonishing size, much of its body remains remarkably slender, little wider than a human wrist. Beneath the drifting colony hangs an extensive curtain of stinging tentacles extending roughly 2 meters, which is about 6 feet, into the surrounding water. Nearly transparent against the darkness, this living net captures fishes and crustaceans unfortunate enough to brush against it. The limits of siphonophore size became even more remarkable during the year 2020, when researchers exploring waters near Western Australia recorded a member of the genus Apolemia estimated to exceed 120 meters in length, which is about 394 feet. If that estimate proves accurate, it represents the longest individual organism ever documented, surpassing every whale, giant squid, and known vertebrate by an extraordinary margin. Such an arrangement solves a profound challenge presented by the deep Pacific. Food appears unpredictably across immense distances. A compact hunter may drift for long periods without encountering enough prey to survive. An elongated colony, however, transforms its own body into an enormous fishing net, increasing the chance that something edible will eventually pass within reach. Rather than investing in speed or strength, evolution expanded the animal into a living trap, extending through the water itself. The siphonophore, therefore, occupies an unusual place in biology. It is one organism composed of countless individuals, many individuals functioning as one organism. Both descriptions are accurate, yet neither feels entirely complete. Within the deep Pacific, where familiar rules have already yielded to unfamiliar possibilities, even the meaning of a single living creature becomes wonderfully difficult to define. Few predators reveal the priorities of the deep Pacific more clearly than the viperfish. Nothing about its appearance seems shaped by balance or elegance. Instead, every feature has been refined toward a single purpose, capturing the rare opportunity presented by passing prey before that opportunity disappears into the darkness forever. The Pacific viperfish, known scientifically as Choliotis makuni, reaches only about 30 centimeters in length, which is about 12 inches. It inhabits an immense vertical range, extending from roughly 200 meters, which is about 656 feet, to nearly 5,000 meters, which is about 16,404 feet. Like many deep-water hunters, it joins the nightly ascent toward richer feeding grounds before returning to greater depths as daylight approaches. Its first impression comes from its teeth. Long, slender fangs extend so far beyond the jaws that the mouth cannot fully close. Rather than hiding these weapons inside the mouth, evolution has allowed them to project outward permanently. Even more remarkable, the teeth are largely transparent. Their mineral structure reflects very little of the surrounding bioluminescent light, making them difficult for nearby prey to detect until the final instant before capture. A close relative, commonly called Sloane's viperfish, carries teeth that are proportionally among the longest possessed by any fish in relation to body size. When the jaws rest, the curved fangs sweep backward toward the animal's own eyes, occupying nearly every available space around the head. What appears excessive from a surface perspective becomes entirely practical, where every successful hunt may determine survival for days or even weeks. The skull itself contributes to this extraordinary feeding strategy. Flexible joints allow the jaws to open to an unusually wide angle, enabling the fish to engulf prey approaching its own size. Meals cannot be selected with great care in the deep Pacific. When nourishment appears, hesitation carries a cost. The ability to swallow unexpectedly large animals becomes another adaptation to an environment where opportunities arrive unpredictably. Running along the back and underside of the body are rows of specialized light-producing organs. These glowing structures perform more than one task. At times, they imitate the appearance of much smaller drifting organisms, encouraging curious prey to approach within striking distance. At other moments, the same lights soften the fish's outline when viewed from below, blending its body into the faint illumination descending from the distant surface. Light remains both invitation and disguise, depending entirely upon circumstance. Vision alone does not guide the attack. Like many fishes, the viperfish possesses an exceptionally sensitive lateral line extending along each side of its body. This sensory system detects subtle disturbances traveling through the surrounding water. Every movement made by another animal generates pressure waves that spread outward through the sea. Even when prey remains almost impossible to see, those delicate vibrations reveal direction, distance, and motion with remarkable precision. When the final strike begins, the movement is astonishingly swift. Recorded attacks approach roughly 2 meters each second, which is about 6.6 feet each second. The burst lasts only an instant before powerful jaws and transparent teeth close around the target. Speed compensates for the scarcity of encounters, ensuring that precious chances are not easily lost. Despite its unmistakable appearance, much of the viperfish remains unknown. Researchers believe reproduction occurs through the release of eggs and reproductive cells into open water, where fertilization takes place externally. Yet no scientist has directly witnessed this process in its natural setting. Most knowledge comes from specimens recovered accidentally in fishing nets after rapid ascent from the deep, removed from the environment that shaped every detail of their existence. The viperfish therefore remains partly concealed behind its own adaptations. It emerges briefly into scientific understanding, then slips once more into the immense darkness, where its true life continues beyond ordinary observation. Few creatures have become as closely associated with the deep Pacific as the anglerfish. Its glowing lure has appeared in books, documentaries, and illustrations for generations, usually presented as the defining symbol of life beneath the reach of sunlight. Yet the famous light above its head is only the beginning of a biological story that becomes far more extraordinary once reproduction enters the picture. The female serratioid anglerfish carries a modified spine projecting from the front of her head. At its tip rests a small organ filled with bioluminescent bacteria or light-producing tissues, depending upon the species. The glow resembles the drifting shimmer of smaller animals, encouraging curious prey to approach. When the distance becomes small enough, the female lunges forward with astonishing speed. Her inward-pointing teeth prevent escape, while her expandable stomach allows meals much larger than her own body to be swallowed whenever fortune provides them. For many observers, this remarkable hunting strategy seems extraordinary enough. Yet finding food is only one challenge in an environment where individuals may spend much of their lives separated by immense distances. Finding another member of the same species can become even less likely than finding prey. The male begins life under entirely different conditions. He is dramatically smaller than the female and lacks the famous glowing lure. His digestive system remains poorly developed, and his liver stores enough energy to sustain him for an extended search without regular feeding. Nearly every feature of his body serves one purpose. His sense of smell becomes extraordinarily refined, capable of detecting the chemical signals released by females drifting somewhere within the immense darkness of the Pacific. He spends his early existence searching rather than feeding. Every current carries faint chemical traces through the water, and somewhere among them lies the scent of a compatible female. Success must come before his stored energy is exhausted. Failure leaves no second opportunity. When the search finally ends, the male bites firmly into the female's body. What follows has few parallels among vertebrate animals. Specialized enzymes begin dissolving the tissues where their bodies meet. Gradually, the skin and blood vessels of both individuals fuse together until a single circulatory system serves them both. Blood carrying oxygen and nutrients now flows freely between male and female, sustaining the smaller partner indefinitely. As this transformation continues, the male changes profoundly. His eyes shrink because they are no longer needed. His fins lose their former purpose. Much of his digestive system disappears, along with many internal organs that once supported an independent existence. Only the reproductive organs remain fully functional. Every other biological responsibility has been surrendered to the female, supporting him through their shared bloodstream. Some females have been discovered carrying as many as 8 attached males simultaneously. Each occupies a separate position upon her body, each permanently fused, each reduced to producing reproductive cells whenever spawning occurs. Rather than seeking mates repeatedly throughout life, the female carries them wherever she travels, ensuring reproduction remains possible whenever favorable conditions arise. This remarkable partnership differs from ordinary parasitism. Under normal circumstances, the immune system of a vertebrate immediately attacks foreign tissue entering the body. Serratioid anglerfish have evolved along a very different path. Their immune defenses have been altered so extensively that the attached male is accepted rather than rejected. Biological identity itself becomes flexible, allowing two separate individuals to function as one integrated organism. From the perspective of surface life, such an arrangement appears almost unimaginable. Within the immense distances and profound isolation of the deep Pacific, however, it represents an elegant solution shaped by evolution. In a world where another encounter may never come, permanently joining the first successful meeting becomes one of the most effective reproductive strategies life has ever produced. There comes a depth where even the faint glow filtering from the distant surface is finally left behind forever. Beyond roughly 1,000 meters, which is about 3,281 feet, the Pacific enters a realm often called the Midnight Zone, a place where daylight has never arrived and never will. Every direction appears exactly the same, because no natural light remains to distinguish one horizon from another. The physical conditions settle into remarkable stability. Temperatures remain between roughly 2 degrees Celsius, or 36 degrees Fahrenheit, and 4 degrees Celsius, or 39 degrees Fahrenheit, changing very little throughout the passing centuries. Pressure climbs from approximately 100 atmospheres to nearly 400 atmospheres, compressing every object with relentless force. Materials that perform reliably at the surface may buckle or fracture here, while living organisms endure conditions that would overwhelm an unprotected human body almost immediately. Although this environment seems impossibly severe, it contains nearly 70% of all seawater on Earth. By volume, it is the single largest habitat on the planet. More living space exists within this cold darkness than across forests, deserts, grasslands, rivers, lakes, and coral reefs combined. The greatest biological landscape on Earth receives no sunlight at all. Its inhabitants reflect the extraordinary demands of this world. Among the most unusual is the vampire squid, despite a name that suggests something far more aggressive than reality. It is neither a true squid in the conventional sense, nor an active predator pursuing large prey. Instead, it occupies its own unique branch of cephalopod evolution, distinct from both squids and octopuses. When threatened, the vampire squid folds its broad webbing upward over its body, surrounding itself with a cloak lined by fleshy projections. The posture appears dramatic, yet its purpose is defensive rather than offensive. Rather than chasing prey through the darkness, it survives largely by gathering drifting organic particles known as marine snow, consuming the slow rain of material descending from waters far above. A body that resembles a hunter supports the habits of a patient collector. The vampire squid also thrives where oxygen concentrations remain exceptionally low. Specialized blood pigments bind oxygen with remarkable efficiency, allowing the animal to remain active in waters where many other creatures would struggle to survive. Its slow metabolism complements this adaptation, reducing energy demands within an environment where every resource remains precious. Nearby lives another remarkable resident, the Dumbo octopus. Named for the broad fins extending from either side of its mantle, it moves by gently flapping these structures while drifting through the immense water column. Unlike shallow water octopuses that frequently crawl across reefs or rocky shores, this species spends much of its existence suspended above the seafloor. Individuals have been documented at depths exceeding 7,000 meters, which is about 22,966 feet, making them among the deepest living octopuses ever recorded. Their rounded bodies, delicate fins, and unhurried movements create an appearance unlike almost any other cephalopod. Yet beneath that gentle form lies another precise adaptation, conserving energy while navigating one of the least forgiving habitats on the planet. Even sound behaves differently within these depths. A remarkable layer known as the sound fixing and ranging channel forms where changes in water temperature and pressure bend low-frequency sound waves back toward its center rather than allowing them to disperse upward or downward. Once captured within this natural pathway, sound can travel astonishing distances across the Pacific with relatively little loss of energy. Great whales make use of this hidden acoustic corridor, sending calls across entire ocean basins to companions impossibly distant from ordinary human experience. In a realm where vision surrendered long ago, the Pacific preserves another form of connection, carrying voices through darkness that stretches farther than light itself can ever reach. Not every meal in the Pacific begins with a hunt. Far below the last trace of daylight, survival depends upon an endless descent that started in waters thousands of meters above. Every creature living beneath 200 meters, which is about 656 feet, that is nearly 200 meters, relies either directly or indirectly on material that slowly falls from the illuminated surface. Marine snow is the name given to this continual shower of organic matter drifting through the water column. It is composed of countless fragments, dead microscopic algae, discarded shells, waste released by animals, transparent mucus, tiny pieces of drifting bodies, and delicate clumps of living and once living material that gradually gather together as they sink. The descent never truly stops. Across the entire Pacific, these particles fall through the darkness every hour of every day, linking distant layers of the ocean into one uninterrupted ecological system. A single microscopic phytoplankton cell released near the surface may descend at only about 1 meter each day. Left entirely alone, reaching the deepest seafloor could require well over 10 years. Such solitary journeys are uncommon. As particles collide, they combine into larger aggregates. Small animals consume them, package them into denser waste, and release them again. Each passage through another digestive system increases the speed of descent, carrying nutrients downward in larger, heavier forms. Even so, very little of the original production survives the journey intact. Approximately 1% of the organic matter created near the surface eventually reaches the abyssal plain. The remaining 99% disappears along the way, consumed by countless mouths, broken apart by microscopic organisms, or dissolved into surrounding seawater. Every layer of the Pacific removes another portion until only a small residue continues toward the greatest depths. By the time these particles finally settle upon the seafloor, they no longer resemble the living communities from which they originated. They have become ancient remnants of distant seasons, processed repeatedly through an enormous chain of life before arriving as scattered nourishment. What reaches the bottom carries only a fraction of its former energy, yet even that reduced inheritance sustains entire ecosystems. The animals waiting there have evolved remarkable ways of finding these rare deposits. Sea cucumbers drifting across the abyssal plain possess chemical senses capable of detecting newly settled organic matter with extraordinary precision. When a richer patch of marine snow arrives, individuals have been observed changing direction and gathering from several paths, converging upon the same location with deliberate persistence. Their movements remain gentle, yet the response reveals how valuable every fresh arrival becomes within a habitat where opportunities are scarce. Other inhabitants participate in the same patient economy. Brittle stars stretch their arms into passing currents. Delicate worms extend feeding structures above the sediment. Tiny crustaceans sift through the newest particles before even smaller organisms continue the work of decomposition. Nothing remains unused for long. Energy passes steadily from one organism to another until almost every possible nutrient has been extracted. This gradual exchange forms one of Earth's most important biological conveyor systems. Sunlight captured by microscopic life near the surface eventually nourishes animals living thousands of meters below, that is nearly thousands of feet beyond ordinary human experience. Although the connection unfolds over months, years, and sometimes even longer, the relationship never breaks. The deepest Pacific remains inseparably tied to waters it will never see. Within this immense darkness, every drifting fragment carries the memory of a brighter world. Every meal reflects a journey through countless living bodies before reaching its final destination. The great depths endure because the surface is always letting something go, and the ocean never allows even the smallest gift to fall without becoming part of another life. Far beneath the familiar rhythms of the upper ocean, another pattern slowly emerges. It is not immediately visible because it unfolds across immense stretches of evolutionary time, yet its results appear startling once they are finally encountered. In many parts of the deep Pacific, creatures that resemble ordinary animals from the surface have grown into forms whose proportions seem almost impossible. The blueprint remains recognizable, while the scale has quietly drifted into unfamiliar territory. Among the clearest examples is the giant isopod. It belongs to the same broad crustacean lineage as the small pillbug often found beneath damp stones or fallen logs. Near the surface, those armored relatives fit comfortably upon a fingertip. In the deep Pacific, however, the giant isopod may reach 76 centimeters, that is nearly 30 inches in length. Its segmented shell encloses 14 walking legs, large compound eyes, and 4 sets of jaws designed to tear apart whatever nourishment eventually reaches the sea floor. Meals are so unpredictable that this scavenger can survive for more than 4 years without eating, conserving energy until another rare opportunity arrives. The same tendency appears in another crustacean known as the supergiant amphipod. This animal reaches approximately 34 centimeters, that is nearly 13 inches, in length within the deepest ocean trenches, more than 10 times the size of many relatives inhabiting shallower waters. Despite its remarkable proportions, scientists have learned surprisingly little about its population or daily existence. Encounters remain uncommon, and much of its life unfolds beyond regular observation, hidden within regions that remain among the least explored on Earth. The phenomenon extends beyond crustaceans. Giant sea spiders wander across deep Pacific and Antarctic seafloors, with leg spans exceeding 70 centimeters, that is nearly 28 inches. Their bodies remain comparatively compact, while their limbs stretch outward in extraordinary proportions. Space inside the central body becomes so limited that portions of the digestive and reproductive organs extend into the legs themselves. Anatomy adapts wherever room can be found, producing an arrangement that appears unusual only because surface environments rarely demand such solutions. Scientists refer to this recurring pattern as deep-sea gigantism. The precise cause remains uncertain, and several explanations continue to be investigated together rather than separately. Permanently low temperatures, often remaining between 2 degrees Celsius or 36 degrees Fahrenheit and 4 degrees Celsius or 39 degrees Fahrenheit, slow metabolism, and may extend lifespan, allowing animals to continue growing over many years. Scarce food also favors bodies capable of storing greater reserves between infrequent meals. Larger size can become an advantage when nourishment arrives only after long intervals. Researchers also continue examining whether immense pressure influences cellular growth in subtle ways that become significant over evolutionary time. No single explanation completely accounts for every example. Instead, gigantism appears to arise from several environmental pressures acting together across countless generations. Evolution responds patiently, adjusting familiar forms until they become almost unrecognizable, while still preserving the underlying design inherited from distant ancestors. The result carries an unusual kind of familiarity. A giant isopod still resembles the modest creature resting beneath a garden stone. Every segment, every joint, and every armored plate echoes that shared ancestry. Yet the comparison also reveals how profoundly an environment can reshape life without abandoning its original plan. The deep Pacific does not simply invent entirely new organisms. It often takes existing designs and stretches them beyond expectations, preserving the past while enlarging it into something that seems to belong to another world. Within these immense depths, size itself becomes another adaptation, shaped by cold water, scarce nourishment, immense pressure, and extraordinary spans of time. Creatures that once shared humble beginnings with ordinary surface relatives continue their patient existence below, carrying familiar forms into dimensions that remind us how flexible the living world can become when the ocean is allowed to write its own rules. For much of modern science, one assumption stood with remarkable confidence. Every complex community of living organisms, no matter where it existed, ultimately depended upon the light of the sunday. Forests, grasslands, coral reefs, rivers, lakes, and shallow seas all trace their energy back through photosynthesis, the process by which plants and microscopic algae transformed light into living tissue. Follow any food web far enough, and the path always seemed to return to the same radiant source above. This understanding had survived every expedition and every ecosystem examined across the planet. It was no longer treated as a tentative idea. It had become one of biology's guiding principles, woven so deeply into scientific thought that few imagined nature had written an entirely different solution somewhere beyond ordinary reach. Then, on the 17th day of February, in the year 1977, a research submersible named Alvin descended toward the Galapagos Rift. More than 2,500 meters below the Pacific surface, that is nearly 8,202 feet. The scientists aboard expected to encounter a landscape of volcanic rock scattered across a cold and largely barren seafloor. Every previous model suggested that almost nothing substantial could survive so far beneath the reach of sunlight. Instead, the darkness opened onto a living world unlike any previously described. Towering chimneys rose from the ocean floor, releasing dense clouds of black mineral-rich water into the surrounding sea. These structures, later called hydrothermal vents, poured out superheated fluids carrying dissolved chemicals from deep within Earth's crust. Around them clustered immense white clams larger than dinner plates. Brilliant red plumes crowned giant tube worms reaching 2 meters in length, that is nearly 7 feet. Crabs wandered among the rocks. Shrimp gathered in dense numbers. Thick blankets of bacteria coated nearly every available surface, forming the true foundation of this extraordinary community. Nothing about the scene matched existing expectations. No sunlight reached this depth. Not a single ray had ever penetrated so far into the Pacific. The familiar chain connecting plants to grazing animals and predators simply did not exist here. Yet the abundance of life was unmistakable, flourishing beside waters that would seem hostile to almost every known surface organism. The answer lay not in light, but in chemistry. Specialized bacteria possessed the remarkable ability to extract energy from sulfur-containing compounds emerging from the vents. Rather than relying upon photosynthesis, they performed chemosynthesis, building organic matter directly from chemical reactions fueled by Earth's internal heat. These microscopic organisms became the primary producers for the entire ecosystem. Giant tube worms, clams, and many other animals depended upon them either through direct partnerships or through the broader food web that spread outward from the vents. The giant tube worms themselves revealed how completely evolution had embraced this unusual arrangement. They possessed no mouth, no stomach, and no digestive tract. Instead, their bodies housed enormous populations of chemosynthetic bacteria within a specialized internal organ. The worms supplied the bacteria with chemicals and dissolved gases carried by the surrounding water. In return, the bacteria produced nutrients that sustained their hosts. Two entirely different forms of life had become inseparable, thriving together where conventional biology once predicted only emptiness. The discovery reshaped scientific understanding almost immediately. It did not merely add another unusual habitat to an already familiar catalog. It demonstrated that complex ecosystems could arise without any dependence upon sunlight at all. The requirement that life must ultimately draw its energy from the bright surface world proved not to be universal, but conditional. Far below the Pacific, beside volcanic fractures hidden from every sunrise that had ever touched Earth, life had quietly written another beginning, following a path powered not by the sky above, but by the restless planet beneath. Long before any animal could claim this place as home, the chemistry of the vent had already begun its patient work, pouring dissolved minerals and gases into the surrounding water. Within that flowing mixture, one remarkable creature came to embody an entirely different blueprint for survival. Rising from clusters anchored around the hydrothermal vents, the tube worm, known as Riftia pachyptilla, appeared less like a familiar animal than a living column shaped by the restless heart of the Earth itself. Many individuals grow beyond 2 meters in length, that is nearly 7 feet, while remaining sheltered inside a pale outer tube built from chitin, the same durable material that forms the external skeletons of insects and many other arthropods. This protective casing holds the worm firmly in place as chemically rich water streams continuously passed. Rather than wandering across the seafloor in search of food, it remains rooted where volcanic fluids and surrounding seawater meet, allowing an invisible exchange to unfold every moment of its existence. At first glance, the animal seems incomplete. There is no mouth waiting to receive food. There is no stomach hidden within the body. No intestine winds through its interior. Every feature normally associated with feeding has disappeared through evolution because it is no longer necessary. The tube worm has surrendered the entire process of digestion to another form of life, entering a partnership so complete that neither participant can survive without the other. Occupying the space where a digestive system would ordinarily be is an extraordinary structure known as the trophosome. This large, sponge-like organ accounts for much of the worm's body mass and contains billions upon billions of chemosynthetic bacteria. These microscopic companions perform every nutritional task the worm can no longer accomplish alone. They harvest energy from hydrogen sulfide carried upward by the vent water, a substance poisonous to most familiar forms of life. Using that chemical energy, they manufacture organic compounds that nourish both themselves and the animal surrounding them. The exchange depends upon remarkable precision. Extending above the protective tube is a broad crimson plume that sways constantly in the moving water. Rich with blood vessels, this feathery structure absorbs hydrogen sulfide, oxygen, and carbon dioxide directly from the surrounding sea. The worm's specialized blood contains unusual molecules capable of transporting both oxygen and hydrogen sulfide at the same time without allowing the two substances to interfere with one another. Those materials travel inward until they reach the waiting bacteria sheltered within the trophosome, where countless microscopic chemical reactions continue without interruption. Nothing in this relationship resembles farming as it appears on land, yet the comparison comes surprisingly close. The bacteria receive shelter, stability, and a continuous delivery of essential ingredients. The worm receives every nutrient required to build tissue, repair damage, and sustain life. Neither consumes the other. Instead, each maintains an ancient agreement written through natural selection, refined across generations until the boundary between animal and microorganism becomes difficult to separate. This arrangement also reshapes the meaning of appetite. The tube worm never searches for prey drifting through the water. It never tears flesh or grazes upon organic debris. Its nourishment arrives through chemistry transformed into living matter by unseen partners residing within its own body. Every moment becomes an act of cultivation rather than consumption, powered by substances emerging from fractures deep inside the planet instead of energy descending from the distant sky. Within this remarkable organism, the familiar pathways connecting mouths, stomachs, and food chains give way to an entirely different architecture. The body itself becomes a living vessel built to support another community, while that hidden community sustains the larger animal in return. Together, they flourish more than 2,500 meters beneath the Pacific surface, that is nearly 8,202 feet, surrounded by complete darkness, nourished by volcanic chemistry, carrying forward a form of life that owes nothing to sunlight and everything to cooperation. Far beneath the drifting colonies and living towers already encountered, the ocean floor opens into places where the planet reveals its own internal heat. Here, stone itself seems to breathe. Cracks in the crust become gateways through which water returns after an extraordinary journey, emerging transformed by temperatures and pressures almost impossible to imagine from the world above. Among the most remarkable of these features are the formations known as black smokers. They are neither volcanoes in the familiar sense, nor ordinary underwater springs. Instead, they are immense mineral chimneys through which superheated water erupts from deep beneath the seafloor. That water can exceed 400 degrees Celsius or 752 degrees Fahrenheit, while entering surrounding seawater lingering only a little above freezing. The contrast approaches 395 degrees Celsius or 743 degrees Fahrenheit, creating the greatest sustained natural temperature difference known anywhere on Earth. Under ordinary conditions, such water would erupt into steam the instant it reached such extraordinary heat, yet this environment obeys a different set of physical rules. At depths near 2,500 meters, that is nearly 8,202 feet, the immense weight of the ocean produces pressures approaching 250 atmospheres. Such overwhelming pressure prevents the heated water from boiling, despite temperatures far beyond the familiar boiling point at the surface. It remains a liquid until the instant it pours into the surrounding cold seawater. The meeting of these two fluids begins another remarkable transformation. Dissolved minerals carried upward within the heated water suddenly solidify as temperatures plunge. Tiny particles of metal sulfides form dark clouds that resemble rising smoke, giving these vents their memorable name. Layer after layer of newly deposited minerals settles around the opening, slowly constructing towering chimneys that continue growing as long as the underground plumbing remains active. Some of these mineral towers achieve astonishing proportions. One celebrated structure, known as Godzilla, rose along the Juan de Fuca Ridge off the coast of Oregon. Before collapsing during the 1996, it reached more than 40 meters in height, that is nearly 131 feet. Built grain by grain from minerals dissolved deep beneath the crust, it stood like a natural monument assembled entirely by chemistry, existing in a realm where no sunrise had ever touched its surface. Surrounding these chimneys, the seafloor changes with startling abruptness. Beyond the influence of the vent lies an expanse where food remains scarce and living creatures appear only occasionally. Near the vent itself, life gathers in remarkable abundance. Dense clusters of tube worms anchor themselves against the current. Shrimp crowd the mineral walls in shimmering layers. Crabs move patiently across bacterial coatings, while fish circle the rising plume where warmth and chemistry mingle in constant motion. The transition resembles an oasis surrounded by an immense wilderness, although every living thing depends upon forces entirely different from those supporting familiar landscapes. At the foundation of this thriving community are microscopic bacteria and members of another ancient domain of life known as archaea. Rather than drawing energy from sunlight, they obtain it by transforming hydrogen sulfide into organic matter through chemosynthesis. A compound lethal to many surface organisms becomes the fuel supporting an entire ecosystem. These microscopic pioneers provide nourishment for the larger creatures already woven into this remarkable community, linking geology directly to biology through an unbroken chain of chemical exchange. Not every hydrothermal vent burns with equal intensity. White smokers release cooler fluids carrying different dissolved minerals, although those temperatures would still exceed boiling conditions at the surface. Diffuse vents allow warm, chemical-rich water to seep gently through cracks in the crust, fostering microbial communities unlike those surrounding the towering chimneys. Each variation creates its own neighborhood of specialized organisms shaped by subtle differences in heat, chemistry, and flow. Within these hidden landscapes, every black smoker becomes far more than a geological curiosity. It serves as a meeting place between the restless interior of the planet and the living world above it, where stone, water, chemistry, and biology remain bound together in an enduring partnership sustained entirely without sunlight. Around each hydrothermal vent, the living landscape becomes unexpectedly abundant. After crossing wide expanses where nourishment arrives only in scattered fragments, the transition feels almost impossible. Organisms crowd together in dense assemblies, filling every suitable surface with movement and color, as though the seafloor has discovered a hidden source of prosperity, far removed from the familiar economy of sunlight. Among the most remarkable residents are the giant tube worms already encountered, whose astonishing pace of growth sets them apart from nearly every other marine invertebrate. Under favorable conditions, individuals can reach 1.5 meters in length, that is nearly 5 feet, within only about 2 years. Such rapid development would be difficult to imagine in most deep ocean environments, where food is scarce and growth often proceeds with patient slowness across decades. At the vent, however, the supply of chemical energy remains concentrated and remarkably dependable, allowing life to invest its resources in swift expansion rather than prolonged waiting. The surrounding water carries a continuous flow of dissolved compounds rising from beneath the crust, and the chemosynthetic bacteria living inside these animals transform that abundance into nourishment without interruption. Instead of depending upon the uncertain descent of organic material from distant surface waters, the tube worms draw upon an energy source arriving directly from the restless geology beneath them. Their remarkable size reflects not excess, but opportunity, shaped by conditions found almost nowhere else on Earth. Nearby, immense clams settle into the mineral-rich seabed, opening their thick shells just enough to expose tissues that support another partnership with chemosynthetic bacteria. Some species reach approximately 26 centimeters in length, that is nearly 10 inches, becoming far larger than many relatives inhabiting shallow coastal waters. Their gills shelter dense bacterial communities that manufacture organic compounds from chemical energy, providing nourishment through cooperation rather than conventional feeding. Like the tube worms beside them, these clams reveal how completely evolution has reorganized familiar biological designs within this extraordinary environment. Among the most curious inhabitants are the creatures commonly called yeti crabs. Their claws and forelimbs appear covered with pale hair like filaments that serve a remarkable purpose. Upon those delicate strands, colonies of chemosynthetic bacteria flourish in dense layers. The crab carefully cultivates these microscopic partners upon its own body, then harvests and consumes them as food. The distinction between farmer and farmland nearly disappears. Every movement through the vent water becomes an act of tending an invisible crop, sustained by chemistry rather than sunlight. Although hydrothermal vents share similar foundations, no two communities are entirely alike. Vast distances separate one active vent field from another, with broad stretches of cold abyssal plain lying between them. For organisms adapted exclusively to the chemical richness surrounding active vents, those barren intervals become nearly impossible barriers. Populations remain isolated from one another across immense reaches of seafloor, following separate evolutionary paths despite relying upon remarkably similar partnerships with microscopic life. Across generations, That isolation encourages subtle differences to accumulate. Species found at one vent may never encounter close relatives inhabiting another system hundreds of kilometers away. That is nearly hundreds of 62 miles for every 100 kilometers separating them. Distinct communities emerge, each carrying its own evolutionary history, while preserving the same underlying pattern of life supported by chemistry rising from below. Yet even these thriving oases exist beneath an unseen geological deadline. Hydrothermal vents remain active only while volcanic forces continue supplying heat and dissolved minerals through hidden fractures in the crust. As tectonic processes gradually shift, a flourishing vent may cool and fall dormant. The chemical foundation sustaining every worm, clam, crab, bacterium, and microscopic partner slowly disappears. Communities that require generations to assemble must either disperse in search of another active refuge or fade with the fading warmth beneath them. Their existence unfolds according to rhythms measured not only by biology, but by the enduring movements of the planet itself, where life prospers through remarkable abundance while resting upon foundations that are, in geological time, never permanent. Beyond the bustling neighborhoods surrounding hydrothermal vents, the Pacific gradually settles into an astonishing plain that stretches farther than imagination comfortably follows. The dramatic towers, chemical plumes, and dense colonies fade into the distance, replaced by an immense landscape whose greatest defining feature is its persistence. Here, the seafloor continues, almost without interruption, extending across a realm so vast that it becomes less like a destination and more like another world beneath the ocean. This is the abyssal plain, beginning below roughly 4,000 meters, that is nearly 13,123 feet. The physical conditions remain remarkably stable. Temperatures usually rest between 2 degrees Celsius, or 36 degrees Fahrenheit, and 4 degrees Celsius, or 39 degrees Fahrenheit. Pressure rises towards 600 atmospheres, compressing everything beneath an extraordinary burden. No trace of sunlight has ever reached these depths. The only nourishment comes from the small remnant of organic material that survives its long descent through the ocean, representing approximately 1% of what was originally produced near the surface after years of continual consumption by countless organisms above. Its scale challenges every familiar comparison. The abyssal plain covers more area than all of Earth's continents combined, making it the largest continuous landscape anywhere upon the planet. Mountains, valleys, and coastlines dominate human imagination because they surround everyday life, yet they occupy far less space than this enormous submerged plain. Despite its size, only a tiny fraction has ever been observed directly by cameras, research vehicles, or human eyes. Most of it remains unseen, preserved beneath kilometers of water that is nearly miles beyond ordinary experience. The contrast becomes even more remarkable when considering exploration itself. Modern science possesses more detailed maps of the surface of Mars than of the Pacific abyssal floor. This comparison is not an exaggeration, but a consequence of the extraordinary challenge presented by pressure, distance, darkness, and the immense expense required to survey such an inaccessible environment. Vast portions of the largest landscape on Earth remain known only through broad measurements rather than detailed observation. Life, nevertheless, continues across this expansive plain with remarkable persistence. Sea cucumbers become some of its most familiar inhabitants, moving patiently over the sediment while processing enormous quantities of material in search of tiny traces of organic nutrition. Deep ocean cameras have recorded broad gatherings, advancing together across the seafloor, each individual slowly collecting nourishment from deposits that have already passed through countless other living bodies during their descent from the distant surface. Nearby, brittle stars raise their slender arms into the surrounding water, intercepting drifting particles carried by gentle currents. Polychaete worms tunnel beneath the sediment, continuously reshaping the upper layers while searching for organic fragments hidden below. Thin bacterial coatings spread across exposed surfaces, transforming microscopic resources into living tissue. No single organism appears abundant when viewed alone, yet across such an immense territory, their combined presence forms a substantial living community, sustained by remarkable efficiency rather than plentiful food. Even the sediment beneath these creatures carries an extraordinary history. It is far more than accumulated mud. Layer upon layer contains the remains of microscopic plankton, delicate shells, organic fragments, mineral particles, and the countless descendants of organisms that completed their journeys through the Pacific over millions of years. Each new deposit settles upon those that came before, preserving an archive written gradually through geological time. Every grain contributes another page to a record extending far beyond the lifespan of any individual species. If it were somehow possible to walk across this immense plain, each step would rest upon the compressed remains of innumerable generations carried downward from waters far above. The landscape would reveal itself not as barren emptiness, but as the accumulated memory of an entire ocean, shaped by patience, preserved beneath enduring cold, and sustained by the slow passage of life from one world into another. There comes a point in the Pacific where even the vast abyss gives way to something more secluded, as though the planet has folded inward upon itself. The broad seafloor fractures into immense scars that descend beyond ordinary imagination, carrying the ocean into a realm so unlike those above that science reserves a separate name for it. This is the hadal zone, a title borrowed from Hades, the ancient figure associated with the underworld, reflecting not mythology itself, but the extraordinary depth of these hidden landscapes. The hadal zone begins below 6,000 meters, that is nearly 3,728 miles, and continues toward almost 11,000 meters, which is about 6,835 miles. These profound depths exist within oceanic trenches, carved along the boundaries where Earth's immense tectonic plates converge. Rather than forming broad valleys, the trenches descend as narrow, elongated depressions whose walls channel water into the deepest places known anywhere on the planet. Every descent into one of these trenches passes through conditions that become increasingly isolated from the surrounding ocean. Although the hadal zone occupies only about 1.1% of the global seafloor by area, it contains approximately 45% of the entire vertical depth range of the world's oceans. This remarkable contrast reveals how a comparatively small portion of the ocean floor contains nearly half of its total depth. Immense vertical distance is compressed into an exceptionally limited geographic area, creating environments unlike any other marine habitat. Across Earth, there are 27 major hadal trenches, and the overwhelming majority lie within the Pacific Basin. Together they trace the margins of the ocean in a broad arc that mirrors the same restless geological boundary responsible for many of the world's earthquakes and volcanoes. These trenches are not scattered randomly. They occupy places where tectonic forces have remained active across immense spans of geological time, continuously reshaping the planet beneath the sea. Each trench forms through the gradual process of subduction, during which one tectonic plate slides beneath another. The movement proceeds only a few centimeters each year, yet over millions of years it carries enormous slabs of Earth's outer shell downward into the interior. This prolonged compression stores tremendous geological stress, while simultaneously sculpting the deepest topography on Earth. The Pacific Plate participates in some of the most active subduction systems known, explaining why so many of the planet's greatest ocean depths are concentrated within this single basin. Remarkably, these trenches are separated from one another by wide expanses of abyssal plain that function as nearly impassable barriers for creatures adapted to hadal conditions. The Japan Trench, the Kermadec Trench, the Philippine Trench, and the Tonga Trench each shelter biological communities that have followed their own evolutionary pathways for immense periods. Species thriving within one trench may never encounter those inhabiting another because the intervening seafloor presents conditions they cannot successfully cross. This remarkable isolation produces an exceptional degree of endemism. Animals discovered at the bottom of one Pacific trench may exist nowhere else on Earth, even when another trench lies only 3,000 kilometers away, which is about 1,864 miles. To human observers, that distance may seem considerable, yet traversable. To organisms exquisitely adapted to a particular trench, it represents a separation as complete as an entire continent would be for many terrestrial species. The result is a collection of ecosystems existing almost like distant islands beneath the sea, each shaped by its own history, pressures, and evolutionary experiments. Hidden beneath unimaginable weight, beyond every trace of daylight, the hadal trenches preserve some of the most isolated living communities on the surface of the planet, reminding us that even within one connected ocean, life can remain separated for ages beyond ordinary comprehension. Pressure cannot be seen drifting through the water, yet it becomes the defining force long before the deepest trenches come into view. Every meter of descent adds another fraction of an invisible burden until, far below the familiar ocean, the weight itself becomes the landscape. In the hadal realm, geography explains only part of the isolation. The greater barrier is physics, shaping every living cell with relentless consistency. Water pressure increases by approximately 1 atmosphere for every 10 meters of depth. By the time the ocean reaches 6,000 meters, that is nearly 3,728 miles, the surrounding pressure has climbed to about 600 atmospheres. At 11,000 meters, which is about 6,835 miles, the depth reached within Challenger Deep. The load rises to approximately 1,100 atmospheres. No mountain on land, no desert, and no frozen plain experiences conditions remotely comparable to this immense and uninterrupted force. The influence of such pressure reaches far beyond bones or muscles. It acts upon the microscopic architecture of life itself. Every living cell depends upon proteins, intricate molecules folded into precise three-dimensional forms that allow them to perform specific tasks. Some transport nutrients, others repair damaged tissue. Countless enzymes guide chemical reactions that keep every organism alive from one moment to the next. Their shape is their function, and pressure challenges that delicate arrangement. As pressure rises high enough, many proteins begin to lose the complex folds that give them their purpose. They unfold into less useful forms, no longer able to perform the reactions upon which living cells depend. Enzymes cease to accelerate essential chemistry. Cell membranes, ordinarily flexible enough to regulate the movement of materials into and out of the cell, become increasingly rigid. The intricate molecular machinery sustaining life gradually slows until ordinary biological processes can no longer continue. For a human being, the consequences extend beyond the familiar image of crushing weight. At the depth of Challenger Deep, an unprotected body would experience the collapse of every air-filled space almost immediately. The lungs could no longer function. The middle ears and air passages would fail. Water itself cannot be significantly compressed, so the body's soft tissues would not flatten in the manner often imagined, yet pressure would force fluids across delicate membranes, disrupt cellular balance, and rapidly overwhelm every system required for survival. Death would arrive almost at once, not from a single catastrophic event, but from countless biological failures occurring together. Yet, the hadal trenches remain inhabited. Their residents endure these conditions because their biology has never been designed for any other world. Among the most remarkable examples are microorganisms known as piezophiles, whose very name means pressure lovers. Rather than resisting immense pressure, they have evolved molecular structures that depend upon it. The membranes surrounding their cells contain specialized lipids that remain fluid under forces that would harden the membranes of ordinary organisms. Their proteins possess architectures that are more flexible and compressible, allowing essential reactions to continue even beneath 1,100 atmospheres. Every adaptation reflects millions of years spent refining chemistry for an environment that would instantly disable most other forms of life. The remarkable consequence of this transformation appears when these microorganisms are removed from their native depths. Carried upward through the water column, the steadily decreasing pressure begins to damage the very structures that once protected them. Proteins adapted to crushing force lose stability. Cellular systems that require extraordinary pressure begin to malfunction. The ordinary surface ocean becomes, for them, an unfamiliar and hazardous place. The hadal zone therefore remains separated not merely by immense distance, but by a molecular boundary that few organisms can ever cross. Within those profound trenches, conditions that seem impossibly severe elsewhere have become entirely ordinary, and life continues according to rules written not in sunlight or seasons, but in the immense and unyielding weight of the sea itself. Far beneath the immense weight of the Pacific, where every familiar biological rule has already been tested by depth and pressure, the smallest inhabitants reveal perhaps the greatest transformation of all. They are not merely descendants of ordinary microbes that endured increasingly difficult conditions. Over millions of years, they have become something fundamentally different, shaped from the molecular level upward by an environment found nowhere else on Earth. The microbial communities inhabiting the hadal trenches represent a biological architecture unlike that of organisms living nearer the surface. Evolution has acted upon countless generations exposed to relentless compression, selecting not simply for endurance, but for entirely new solutions to the demands of existence beneath extraordinary pressure. Their chemistry follows principles recognizable to every living cell, yet the details have diverged so extensively that many of their molecular components possess characteristics unseen elsewhere in the known biosphere. Genetic investigations of microorganisms recovered from sediments within the Mariana Trench have revealed enzymes unlike those found in organisms above 6,000 meters, that is nearly 3,728 miles. Enzymes serve as biological catalysts, guiding the chemical reactions that sustain every process inside a living cell. In hadal microbes, these catalysts possess structures that differ in subtle but profound ways, allowing them to remain active where ordinary biological machinery would lose its ability to function. Many surface proteins begin to unfold when exposed to sufficiently intense pressure. Their carefully arranged shapes become distorted until they can no longer perform their intended tasks. The enzymes of piezophils follow a different design. They are more compressible and retain greater molecular flexibility, preserving their three-dimensional architecture even while surrounded by pressures approaching those at the deepest ocean floor. What would represent destruction for most organisms becomes an ordinary condition for them, simply another aspect of daily existence. The membranes surrounding their cells have also undergone remarkable modification. Compared with microbes living in shallow water, piezophils contain much higher proportions of unsaturated fatty acids within those membranes. This chemical adjustment prevents the membrane from becoming excessively rigid under immense pressure. A useful comparison can be found in ordinary butter. When it contains a greater proportion of unsaturated fats, it remains soft and spreadable at ordinary temperatures instead of becoming firm. In much the same way, these specialized cellular membranes preserve the flexibility required for nutrients, wastes, and chemical signals to continue moving across the boundary of the cell despite overwhelming external force. Contrary to earlier assumptions, the deepest trench sediments are not biologically empty. Samples collected from hadal environments consistently reveal abundant populations of bacteria, archaea, and numerous single-celled organisms. Together, they form active communities that continuously recycle carbon, nitrogen, and other essential nutrients. Every grain of sediment participates in an intricate network of microscopic activity, sustaining chemical cycles that researchers are only beginning to measure with confidence. The diversity contained within these hidden microbial populations has become so striking that scientists increasingly regard them as a separate biological reservoir, preserving an extraordinary collection of genetic innovations unavailable elsewhere. Every generation has contributed additional molecular refinements, each one shaped by uninterrupted selection under conditions more demanding than those experienced by almost any other environment on the planet. Viewed from a broad perspective, these microorganisms still belong to the same great family of life that covers forests, deserts, rivers, and shallow seas. Yet when examined at the molecular scale, the resemblance grows increasingly faint. Evolution has written an alternative version of biology beneath 1,100 atmospheres, producing living systems that echo familiar patterns while differing in countless invisible details, reminding us that the deepest Pacific has not merely adapted life to extreme conditions, it has patiently rebuilt it from the smallest components upward, among the finest grains of sediment resting at the deepest reaches of the Pacific. There exists an organism so unusual that its description seems to resist ordinary expectation. Everything surrounding it suggests a landscape shaped by immense pressure, ancient deposits, and microscopic life, yet one of the most remarkable inhabitants is neither an animal nor a colony. It is a single living cell, carrying out every function of life within one continuous body while resting on the floor of the Mariana Trench. The xenophyophore belongs to a group of giant single-celled organisms unlike anything commonly encountered nearer the surface. It is not assembled from many cooperating cells, nor does it represent a collection of smaller individuals. One nucleus governs one cell, and together they create a living structure capable of surviving at depths approaching 11,000 meters, which is about 6,835 miles, where conditions exceed the limits tolerated by almost every other known form of complex life. Some individual xenophyophores discovered within the Mariana Trench, have grown beyond 10 centimeters in diameter. A living cell of that size can be seen without magnification, large enough to rest comfortably within the palm of a human hand. No other documented single-celled organism reaches comparable dimensions while remaining one uninterrupted biological individual. The contrast between microscopic simplicity and remarkable physical scale gives the xenophyophore an appearance almost detached from familiar categories of life. Its body is enclosed within a protective structure known as a test. Yet this shelter is not produced from minerals secreted entirely from within. Instead, the organism patiently gathers material from its surroundings. Tiny grains of sand, fragments of minerals, delicate sponge spicules, and other particles scattered across the trench floor are cemented together with natural organic secretions. Gradually, these collected pieces become an intricate dwelling unique to each species, shaped not by conscious design, but through inherited biological patterns refined across immense spans of evolutionary time. The result is an organism that constructs its own home while remaining only one cell. Every addition to the surrounding shell becomes part of a protective architecture assembled from the landscape itself. The sediment provides the building materials, and the living occupant slowly transforms scattered fragments into a stable refuge capable of enduring one of the harshest environments on the planet. Another remarkable characteristic lies hidden within the chemistry of its tissues. Xenophyophores accumulate unusually high concentrations of heavy metals, including lead, uranium, and mercury, substances that would prove highly toxic to most organisms inhabiting surface environments. Rather than succumbing to these elements, the giant cell appears able to tolerate them through biochemical mechanisms that remain only partly understood. Researchers continue investigating how these compounds are stored, neutralized, or incorporated without disrupting essential cellular functions. The intricate shell performs another unexpected role. It becomes a neighborhood for other forms of life. Small crustaceans, delicate worms, foraminifera, and additional microscopic organisms occupy the spaces within and around the test, using its chambers as shelter upon the otherwise open trench floor. A single cell, therefore, supports an entire miniature community, offering structure where little else interrupts the surrounding sediment. The largest known individual cell on Earth becomes at the same time a habitat for numerous neighboring species. Despite decades of exploration, much about the xenophyophore remains uncertain. Scientists still lack complete understanding of how it reproduces, how long individual organisms persist, and precisely how its remarkable resistance to heavy metals functions at the molecular level. Almost no researchers have observed these giant cells alive within their natural surroundings because reaching nearly 11,000 meters, which is about 6,835 miles, remains among the most demanding journeys in scientific exploration. Even now, the deepest Pacific continues to shelter one of Earth's largest cells beneath conditions that have revealed only a small portion of its enduring story. Long before any living creature settled into the deepest Pacific, the foundation of that world was already being shaped by forces moving with extraordinary patience. The Mariana Trench did not appear through a single dramatic event. It emerged from a collision that has continued for millions of years and remains active today, changing the architecture of the planet by distances measured only in centimeters each year, yet accumulating into one of Earth's greatest geological structures. Beneath the western Pacific, the Pacific Plate advances toward the smaller Mariana Plate. When the two meet, The denser Pacific plate bends downward and slips beneath its neighbor in a process known as subduction. This descent carries enormous slabs of ancient oceanic crust into the mantle below, while the edge of the overriding plate is drawn downward. Over immense spans of geological time, that gradual motion has carved an immense curved depression across the ocean floor, producing the deepest geographical feature on the surface of the planet. The Mariana Trench stretches for roughly 2,550 kilometers, which is about 1,585 miles, forming a broad crescent across the western Pacific. Its immense length exceeds that of many mountain ranges, while its walls descend for several kilometers into a realm where sunlight has never arrived. Compared with the familiar landscape of the Grand Canyon, the trench extends for a distance nearly 5 times greater, although its true scale remains concealed beneath the sea. Near the southern portion of this enormous geological boundary lies Challenger Deep, the deepest location yet measured on Earth. Its floor rests at approximately 10,984 meters below sea level. At such depth, the ocean has become a world governed almost entirely by pressure, darkness, and geology, where every layer above contributes to the immense weight pressing continuously upon the trench floor. The name Challenger Deep preserves the memory of the British Royal Navy research vessel Challenger, whose historic expedition reached these waters during the year 1875. Using the sounding technology available at the time, the expedition revealed depths so extraordinary that many scientists initially struggled to accept the measurements. Even though later expeditions refined the figures with greater precision, the original discovery transformed humanity's understanding of the ocean by revealing that Earth's surface descended far deeper than previously imagined. Yet the trench is not simply an empty depression left behind by ancient events. The collision between the plates continues every day. Their movement is rarely smooth. Friction causes sections of rock to lock together, while stress steadily accumulates. Eventually, that stored energy is released through earthquakes that ripple across the surrounding crust. Some disturbances trigger underwater landslides along the steep trench walls, while the largest movements may displace enormous volumes of seawater, generating tsunamis capable of crossing the Pacific Basin. This continual geological motion means the deepest ocean is also among the most dynamic. Beneath the layers of water, the landscape shifts with slow persistence, punctuated by sudden moments of release. Sediment tumbles into deeper channels, fractured rock settles into new positions, and ancient crust continues its descent toward the planet's interior. The organisms inhabiting this environment carry on their lives amid processes vastly older than their own evolutionary histories, unaware of the immense mechanical forces operating beneath them. The Mariana Trench, therefore, exists not as a passive hole carved into the ocean floor, but as an expression of a living planet whose interior remains active. Every movement of the descending plate reshapes the boundary by almost imperceptible amounts, while countless generations of hadal organisms continue to occupy its slopes and deepest basin. In the greatest depth known on Earth, biology and geology remain inseparably linked, each enduring within a landscape still being written by the restless motion of the planet itself. Some places are understood not by their appearance, but by the numbers that define them. Challenger Deep is one of those places. Its landscape remains hidden beneath almost 11 kilometers of seawater that is nearly 6.8 miles beyond every familiar reference from the surface world. The figures describing it seem abstract at first, yet each one marks the edge of what Earth itself allows. The floor of Challenger Deep lies approximately 10,984 meters beneath sea level. That depth alone reshapes ordinary perspective. If the summit of Mount Everest, rising 8,849 meters above sea level, were carefully lowered into the trench, its highest peak would still remain submerged beneath more than 2,100 meters of water, which is about 1,305 miles. The tallest mountain on the planet would disappear entirely beneath the Pacific, leaving no trace visible from the waves above. Pressure reaches approximately 1,100 atmospheres at the bottom of the trench. Expressed another way, every square inch experiences roughly 16,000 pounds of force. That burden has often been compared to the weight of around 50 fully loaded commercial passenger aircraft pressing upon an area no larger than a human thumb. Such comparisons only hint at the physical reality, because that immense pressure is present everywhere at once, surrounding every surface without pause, every moment of every day. The water itself remains remarkably stable despite such extraordinary conditions. Temperatures rest between 1 degree Celsius, or 34 degrees Fahrenheit, and 4 degrees Celsius, or 39 degrees Fahrenheit. Generation after generation has passed while that narrow range has remained almost unchanged. Long before human civilization emerged, before our own species appeared, the deepest basin of the Pacific already rested within that enduring cold beneath complete darkness. Imagining the descent helps reveal the scale. A solid steel sphere released from the surface would require more than 1 hour before reaching the trench floor. During that uninterrupted fall, it would pass through layer after layer of ocean, crossing regions inhabited by entirely different communities of life. Waters brightened by daylight would gradually yield to perpetual darkness, then to immense plains, and finally to the deepest depression known anywhere upon the planet before the sphere settled into the ancient sediment below. Only a very small number of people have completed that same journey. 27 human beings have descended to Challenger Deep. By comparison, 12 human beings have walked upon the surface of the moon. Although space often seems more distant, more individuals have explored another celestial body than have visited the deepest known place within Earth's own ocean. The first successful descent occurred during the year 1960. United States Navy Lieutenant Don Walsh and Swiss oceanographer Jacques Piccard traveled downward aboard the bathyscaphe Trieste, protected inside a steel sphere whose walls measured approximately 3 centimeters in thickness. That barrier, though appearing modest beside the surrounding ocean, separated its occupants from environmental conditions that would have caused fatal physiological failure almost immediately without protection. When the vessel finally settled upon the trench floor, the explorers reported seeing what appeared to be a flatfish resting upon the sediment. At the time, many scientists still believed vertebrate life could not exist at such extraordinary depths. Whether later interpretations questioned the precise identification mattered less than the immediate observation itself. Something resembling a fish occupied the deepest known point on Earth, standing against long accepted assumptions through simple existence alone. In the greatest depth ever reached by human explorers, the Pacific answered speculation not with words, but with living evidence resting upon the seafloor. The first signs of life upon the floor of the Mariana Trench rarely appear as solitary figures. Instead, they emerge in gatherings, scattered across the sediment like living currents that form and dissolve around every unexpected source of nourishment. Even at the deepest known point in the ocean, the landscape is far from empty. It is inhabited by communities whose rhythms are governed by patience, where every fragment descending from the world above becomes an event shared by countless waiting creatures. Among the most numerous inhabitants are amphipods, small crustaceans whose bodies resemble compact shrimp though they belong to their own ancient branch of marine life. They spend much of their existence moving across or just above the trench floor, searching for anything that can be transformed into nourishment. Organic remains may drift downward for months or even years before finally reaching these depths. When they do, amphipods gather with astonishing speed, emerging from the surrounding sediment in dense swarms that seem to materialize from nowhere. Their success comes from a strategy shaped by scarcity rather than abundance. Food arrives unpredictably, separated by long intervals, and no creature can afford hesitation. Instead of defending permanent feeding grounds, amphipods remain dispersed across the trench until chemical traces spreading through the water reveal that something edible has arrived. Within a short time, hundreds or even thousands may converge upon the same location, reducing fallen material to fragments before currents or competing scavengers can carry it away. Scientific expeditions repeatedly encountered this remarkable behavior whenever baited traps were lowered into Challenger Deep. Equipment returned from the seafloor carrying far more amphipods than many researchers had expected, demonstrating that substantial populations were already present despite the apparent emptiness surrounding them. The animals had not traveled from distant parts of the trench. They had been living nearby all along, concealed within the sediment and responding with extraordinary efficiency to the faintest opportunity. During the year 2014, the Hadal Ecosystem Studies expedition documented another unexpected detail. Cameras recorded some of the highest densities of unusually large amphipods ever observed at these depths. Even more surprising was a behavior never before described. As predatory fish approached feeding sites, the amphipods raised their spiny tail structures and used them defensively, attempting to push rivals away from valuable food. In one of the least explored environments on Earth, familiar ecological interactions such as competition and defense unfolded with unmistakable clarity. Life within the trench extends far beyond these energetic scavengers. Mixed throughout the sediment are extraordinary varieties of foraminifera, single-celled organisms that construct protective shells around themselves. More than 400 distinct species have been identified from Challenger Deep samples, and many were entirely unknown before scientists recovered them from this remote environment. Their shells become part of the sediment itself after death, contributing to a layered record that slowly accumulates across immense spans of geological time. Fresh discoveries continue to reshape expectations. During the year 2024, researchers aboard the Chinese submersible Fenduze completed 23 dives within the Mariana Trench, examining depths ranging from 2,500 meters, which is about 1,553 miles, to 9,500 meters, that is nearly 5,903 miles. They documented thousands of worms and mollusks living together in colonies, unlike anything previously observed at such depths. These findings revealed organized communities thriving where earlier assumptions had predicted only scattered survivors. Each expedition adds another piece to a picture that remains incomplete. Again and again, the deepest Pacific has answered certainty with revision. Whenever limits have been proposed for where life can persist, the trench has responded by revealing organisms already living beyond them, continuing their ancient routines beneath a weight of water that has never persuaded them to do otherwise. Among all the vertebrates that have entered this story, one appears almost delicate enough to vanish into the surrounding water. It possesses neither the imposing proportions of larger deep-sea predators, nor the armored appearance often associated with survival in extreme environments. Instead, The deepest known fish on Earth resembles a creature assembled from softness, transparency, and improbable design, carrying within its fragile form one of the most remarkable biochemical solutions ever produced by evolution. The Mariana snailfish was formally described during the year 2017 and received the scientific name Pseudoliparus swirei in honor of Herbert Swire, an officer who served aboard the British research vessel, His Majesty's Ship Challenger, during the historic expedition of the late 19th century. More than a century separated those first soundings of the trench from the formal recognition of this extraordinary animal, a reminder that discovery often arrives long after a place has first been visited. The fish itself reaches only about 30 centimeters in length, that is nearly 1 foot. Its skin lacks scales, its body appears almost translucent, and its flesh carries a gelatinous texture unlike that of familiar coastal fishes. Viewed without context, it seems less like an inhabitant of crushing ocean depths than an organism too delicate to withstand ordinary handling. Removed from its native environment, its tissues rapidly lose the support provided by immense surrounding pressure, making preserved specimens appear very different from living animals observed in their natural home. During the year 2023, researchers recorded an unidentified snailfish swimming freely at a depth of 8,336 meters, which is about 5,180 miles, within the Mariana Trench. This became the deepest confirmed observation of any vertebrate alive on Earth. Earlier, theoretical models had suggested that fishes would encounter an unavoidable biochemical boundary well above this depth. The observation demonstrated that vertebrate life could extend farther into the hadal world than many scientists had believed possible. Part of this achievement begins with what the snailfish does not possess. Most fishes regulate buoyancy through a swim bladder, a chamber filled with gas that expands or contracts as surrounding pressure changes. Such an organ would collapse completely under hadal conditions, becoming useless long before reaching the trench floor. The snailfish instead relies upon water-rich gelatinous tissue distributed throughout its body, together with remarkably lightweight bones that reduce overall density without depending upon compressed gases. Its form is shaped for stability within a realm where conventional solutions cannot function. The greater achievement, however, unfolds far beneath the visible surface of its body. Every living cell depends upon proteins, maintaining precise three-dimensional shapes. Immense pressure continually attempts to distort these molecular structures, threatening the chemical reactions upon which life depends. The snailfish counters this danger by accumulating exceptionally high concentrations of trimethylamine oxide, a naturally occurring compound that stabilizes proteins and helps preserve their functional form despite overwhelming external pressure. As individuals inhabit greater depths, the concentration of trimethylamine oxide within their tissues increases accordingly. The chemistry of each fish reflects the environment it occupies, almost as though the surrounding ocean has written its own signature into every cell. This gradual adjustment allows proteins to continue folding and functioning where ordinary vertebrate biology would fail. Current scientific understanding suggests that vertebrate life approaches its ultimate biochemical boundary at depths of roughly 8,500 meters, which is about 5,282 miles. Beyond that point, the amount of trimethylamine oxide required for protein stability may begin interfering with other essential cellular processes. The snailfish observed during the year 2023 existed only a short distance beneath that estimated threshold, feeding upon amphipods across the trench floor while living at the very edge of what vertebrate chemistry appears capable of sustaining. The farther this journey has descended, the smaller its protagonists have often become. Vast trenches, towering mineral chimneys, and immense geological forces eventually give way to entities so tiny that they cannot be seen without powerful instruments. Yet even at this smallest scale, the deepest Pacific continues to reveal that no level of its living fabric has been left unfinished. Every layer reaches downward together, from the largest animals to the simplest biological agents known. During the year 2023, researchers examining water and sediment collected from the Mariana Trench identified a bacteriophage, a virus that infects bacteria. The samples came from Challenger Deep, extending the documented boundary of viral existence to the greatest depth yet confirmed on Earth. It was another reminder that every scientific expedition into the trench has uncovered life operating where previous expectations had placed only emptiness. A virus occupies an unusual place within biology. It carries genetic material and possesses the ability to reproduce, but only after entering a living cell and redirecting that cell's own machinery toward making additional copies. Outside a suitable host, it remains inactive, neither growing nor consuming energy in the familiar manner of living organisms. Because of this unusual existence, viruses occupy a boundary that has long challenged biological definitions, sharing characteristics with both chemistry and life without fitting comfortably into either category. Even so, the presence of viruses at Challenger Deep reveals something far larger than the discovery of a single microscopic form. Wherever a bacteriophage exists, bacteria must already be thriving. Viruses cannot persist without hosts, and hosts cannot endure without sources of energy and nutrients. Their discovery therefore confirms that the deepest known place on Earth supports interactions extending to the smallest biological scales, preserving ecological relationships every bit as intricate as those found in forests, rivers, or coral reefs. At a depth of 10,984 meters, which is about 6,824 miles, beneath near freezing water, measuring between 1 degree Celsius, or 34 degrees Fahrenheit, and 4 degrees Celsius, or 39 degrees Fahrenheit, immense pressure surrounds every particle of sediment. Above lies a column of ocean that has remained in place for millions of years. Below, bacteria continue breaking down ancient organic material that has descended from the surface over extraordinary spans of time. Among them, viruses begin and end countless microscopic cycles of infection that have likely continued long before human beings first imagined what existed beneath the waves. These relationships form the foundation of a complete food web. Viruses infect bacteria. Bacteria transform accumulated organic matter into forms that other organisms can use. Amphipods consume that material and rapidly recycle every available source of nourishment, reaching the trench floor. Snailfish prey upon the amphipods. Xenophyophores gather suspended particles while providing shelter for smaller companions within their intricate shells. Each participant depends, directly or indirectly, upon the same slow descent of biological material from the distant surface, where sunlight first entered the chain long before these particles began their gradual journey downward. What appears from above to be an isolated abyss is therefore connected through an unbroken sequence of exchanges extending across every level of biological organization. From genetic material enclosed within viruses to vertebrates swimming near the greatest limits of their chemistry, Each participant contributes to a system sustained over immense stretches of time. Nothing within this environment exists alone. The Mariana Trench stands not as a barren ending to Earth's living world, but as one of its most complete expressions. Every descent into its depths has revealed another layer rather than another absence. Even where darkness, pressure, and distance seem to deny every familiar expectation, biology continues its patient work, assembling an ecosystem that reaches from the smallest known infectious particles to the deepest swimming vertebrates on the planet. Scientific knowledge often advances through careful accumulation, yet the history of the deepest Pacific reveals another pattern, one in which certainty repeatedly yielded to observation. For much of the 20th century, the hadal realm existed more as an idea than as a destination. It was so distant, so inaccessible, and so extreme that many of its characteristics were inferred rather than witnessed. From those inferences emerged conclusions that appeared perfectly reasonable, supported by everything biology and oceanography seemed to understand at the time. Before the decade of the 1950s, the prevailing scientific view held that the deepest ocean could support little more than scattered traces of simple existence, if anything at all. Crushing pressure, near freezing temperatures, perpetual darkness, and the enormous separation from surface food sources combined into an argument that appeared almost impossible to challenge. Complex animals, according to this understanding, simply could not persist under such conditions. This belief was not a speculative, fringe opinion. It represented a broad scientific consensus built upon the evidence then available. That certainty began to weaken during the Danish Galathea expedition, conducted between the years 1950 and 1952. Sampling equipment recovered animals from depths exceeding 10,000 meters, which is about 6,214 miles, demonstrating that life extended far beyond previously accepted limits. Soon afterward, the Soviet research vessel Vityaz expanded upon those findings, collecting additional organisms from similarly profound depths. The hadal zone had not been empty after all. It had simply remained beyond the reach of earlier technology. What followed was not a single correction, but a continuing sequence of revisions that reshaped scientific understanding again and again. Each generation inherited assumptions that seemed well established, only to discover that the deepest Pacific refused to obey them. Boundaries that appeared fixed dissolved whenever instruments became capable of reaching farther or observing more carefully. One widely accepted expectation proposed that vertebrate life possessed a firm lower depth limit. That assumption endured until observations of hadal snailfish revealed active fishes living at 8,336 meters, which is about 5,180 miles. Their existence demonstrated that vertebrate physiology could extend significantly deeper than theoretical models had anticipated, forcing those models to evolve alongside the evidence. Another long-standing belief held that complex ecosystems ultimately depended upon sunlight. The discovery of hydrothermal vent communities during the year 1977 overturned that conclusion by revealing flourishing biological networks sustained through chemical energy rather than photosynthesis. Organisms gathered around volcanic vents proved that an entirely different foundation for complex life had existed all along, hidden beneath immense depths beyond ordinary observation. The hadal sediments themselves produced another revision. Early expectations described the trench floor as biologically impoverished, supporting only sparse populations. Detailed studies, instead, uncovered abundant microbial communities actively recycling nutrients and processing organic material throughout the sediment. What had appeared barren from distant reasoning proved densely inhabited when examined directly. The pattern continued into the present century. During the year 2023, researchers identified the deepest known virus within samples collected from Challenger Deep, extending documented biological activity to the smallest infectious particles known. Even the microscopic foundation of the ecosystem proved richer than expected, revealing that every level of biological organization persisted beneath conditions once considered incompatible with life. Taken together, these discoveries reveal an enduring lesson that reaches beyond the Mariana Trench itself. Each mistaken limit reflected the perspective of observers living at the surface, rather than the true possibilities available to life beneath the sea. The Pacific has never hurried to correct those misunderstandings. It has simply continued its ancient processes, revealing another answer whenever human curiosity developed the means to descend far enough, remain long enough, and finally witness what had always been waiting there. Progress in the deepest Pacific is measured less by completed maps than by the growing realization of how little has yet been seen. Every successful descent into the hadal realm has carried instruments into places that remain visited only rarely, and each return has added another unexpected thread to the tapestry of life beneath the sea. The pattern has become so consistent that discovery is no longer treated as fortunate coincidence. It has become the ordinary outcome of reaching a world that still lies almost entirely beyond direct observation. This remarkable record has unfolded across decades of exploration. Expeditions have revealed previously unknown species of hadal snailfish, established new records for the abundance of supergiant amphipods, and documented behaviors that no scientist had witnessed before. At depths approaching 10,000 meters, which is about 6,214 miles, cameras recorded amphipods raising their spiny tails to defend valuable food from approaching predators. What seemed at first to be simple scavengers displayed interactions that hinted at a far richer ecological story unfolding on the trench floor. Other journeys expanded the picture still further. The Chinese research submersible, known as Fendouge, documented extensive colonies of worms and mollusks living between 2,500 meters, which is about 1,553 miles, and 9,500 meters, that is nearly 5,903 miles. These observations challenged expectations about how densely animals could gather under immense pressure, revealing organized communities where earlier assumptions had predicted only scattered individuals. Microscopic exploration has proven equally transformative. Sediment collected from Challenger Deep has yielded unfamiliar bacteria, archaea, viruses, and countless genetic sequences unlike those cataloged from shallower oceans. Each carefully examined sample expands the known diversity of the deepest Pacific, suggesting that every scoop of sediment contains biological information accumulated across immense spans of time. The smallest discoveries often reshape understanding as profoundly as the largest animals because they illuminate the invisible machinery supporting the entire ecosystem. The pace of exploration has never been limited by curiosity. Instead, it has been constrained by engineering. Reaching the deepest trenches demands vehicles built to withstand pressures that destroy ordinary equipment almost instantly. Cameras require specialized housings capable of resisting crushing forces throughout descents lasting many hours. Autonomous landers must travel downward through nearly 11,000 meters, that is, nearly 6,835 miles, before carrying their observations safely back to the surface. Every successful mission represents years of design, testing, refinement, and patience before the first image is ever recorded. Even with these remarkable advances, direct observation has touched only a minute fraction of the Pacific abyssal plains and hadal trenches. The regions examined by cameras, sampling devices, and research submersibles occupy only tiny windows within an underwater landscape extending across enormous distances. Entire trench systems remain represented by only a handful of visits, while vast stretches have never received sustained biological observation at all. Each expedition therefore resembles the opening of another small window rather than the completion of a survey. Instruments descend for hours, remain briefly upon the seafloor, then ascend carrying fragments of evidence from a landscape comparable in scale to continents. From those fragments emerge unfamiliar species, unexpected behaviors, novel biochemical adaptations, and fresh questions grounded not in speculation but in direct encounter. The deepest Pacific has therefore resisted becoming a thoroughly known place. It remains a realm observed only in passing, revealed through brief moments made possible by extraordinary machines. Every descent widens the boundary of understanding by a little, while the surrounding darkness continues to hold far more than any expedition has yet managed to see. Seen one by one, the inhabitants of the deep Pacific appear almost impossible to reconcile with familiar ideas of how living things should be built. Yet, when their stories are allowed to gather into a single view, another picture begins to take shape. The transparent skull of the barreleye, the permanently joined anglerfish pair, the tube worm that abandoned a digestive system, the immense single-celled xenophyophore collecting heavy metals, and the delicate snailfish, living at astonishing depth, no longer seem like disconnected curiosities. Together they describe a single principle expressed through many forms. None of these organisms represents life, clinging desperately to an unsuitable environment. Each belongs exactly where it exists. Across millions of years, natural selection has reshaped bodies, chemistry, and behavior until conditions that appear impossible from the surface have become ordinary circumstances for those that live there. The deep Pacific has not forced life into endless compromise. Instead, it has provided a different set of rules, and evolution has answered those rules with remarkable precision. The transparent dome protecting the eyes of the barreleye is not evidence of incomplete development. It is an elegant solution for gathering the faintest traces of light drifting through perpetual darkness. Eyes that rotate within that transparent shield allow the fish to search both above and ahead, increasing the chance of detecting prey before precious opportunities disappear. What first appears fragile becomes entirely practical when viewed within the environment that shaped it. The permanently attached male anglerfish follows the same pattern. Across the immense distances separating individuals in the deep ocean, finding a mate may happen only once during an entire lifetime. The fusion of two bodies into one functioning reproductive partnership is therefore not a biological mistake. It removes uncertainty from reproduction in a habitat where encounters are extraordinarily uncommon. An arrangement that would appear extraordinary in shallow water becomes an effective strategy beneath immense pressure and endless darkness. The giant tube worms surrounding hydrothermal vents reveal another version of this transformation. Without mouths or digestive organs, they rely upon bacterial partners living inside their tissues. Those microorganisms convert chemical energy into nourishment, allowing the worms to flourish where sunlight never arrives. The missing digestive tract is therefore not an absence, but a replacement, exchanged for a partnership better suited to a world enriched by sulfur compounds rising from within the planet itself. Even at the smallest scales, the same principle continues. Microorganisms alter the structure of proteins, reshape cell membranes, and modify essential chemistry until crushing pressure becomes part of ordinary existence rather than an obstacle. The enormous, single-celled xenophyophore constructs elaborate shelters from surrounding particles, while accumulating substances that would poison most familiar organisms. Every adaptation reflects countless generations shaped by one persistent environment rather than sudden invention. The snailfish carries this pattern into the world of vertebrates. Its water-rich tissues, delicate skeleton, and carefully balanced chemistry allow it to remain active at depths approaching the known biochemical limits for animals with backbones. The concentration of trimethylamine oxide within its tissues rises with increasing depth, preserving the structure of essential proteins beneath extraordinary pressure. The animal appears unusual only because the standards used to judge it were established in a completely different world. Taken together, these organisms reveal that evolution has never pursued a single ideal body or universal design. It responds only to local conditions, preserving whatever succeeds within a particular place across immense spans of time. The deep Pacific is isolated enough, stable enough, and physically demanding enough that familiar evolutionary processes have followed pathways rarely explored elsewhere. The result resembles an entirely separate branch of biology, even though it emerged from the very same forces that shaped every forest, grassland, river, and coral reef upon the surface of the earth. There comes a point when individual discoveries begin to merge into something larger than themselves. The remarkable animals, unusual microbes, and hidden ecosystems scattered across the Pacific no longer stand as isolated marvels. Together, they become evidence of a world whose true scale has always extended far beyond the horizon seen from the shore. The Pacific Ocean stretches across nearly 1/3 of the surface of the Earth, and beneath its waves lies the largest continuous environment on the planet. From depths beginning around 200 meters, which is about 656 feet, descending through the twilight waters, across the abyssal plains, and finally into the deepest trenches, an immense realm unfolds that has remained almost entirely beyond direct human observation. Even after generations of exploration, only a minute portion of that vast landscape has ever been visited by cameras, instruments, or human eyes. Within that immense volume, countless forms of life continue their existence without reference to the world above. Barreleyes rotate their remarkable eyes beneath transparent shields as they search for faint silhouettes drifting overhead. Vast siphonophores extend delicate chains reaching almost 40 meters, that is nearly 131 feet, through the surrounding water in search of passing prey. Snailfish move across the trench floor at depths approaching the chemical limits of vertebrate biology, while piezophilic microorganisms carry out ordinary cellular processes under pressures that would immediately disable almost every familiar organism from the surface. Each continues according to rhythms established long before humanity ever wondered what might exist below. The immense migration of countless small animals still rises toward shallower waters after darkness settles across the sea, then sinks again before daylight returns. That movement has continued through changing climates, shifting continents, and countless generations of life upon the surface. Far below, hydrothermal vents have supported communities nourished by chemical energy rather than sunlight for spans of time measured not in centuries, but across geological history. The remarkable adaptations seen today were not assembled suddenly. They emerged gradually, refined across immense ages until every tissue, molecule, and behavior became suited to its surroundings. None of these systems depended upon human awareness. The Pacific required no witness for its deepest processes to continue. Long before research vessels crossed its waters, before sophisticated instruments descended into its trenches, and before science recognized that chemical energy could sustain thriving ecosystems, these communities were already complete. Discovery altered human understanding, yet the organisms themselves continued exactly as before, unchanged by observation. That realization carries a significance extending beyond marine biology alone. The greatest lesson offered by the deep Pacific is not that it contains dangerous creatures or forbidding landscapes. Rather, it demonstrates that the living world possesses possibilities far broader than surface experience alone can reveal. Every carefully measured descent has shown that assumptions based solely upon familiar environments capture only a fraction of what evolution can accomplish when given enough time and a different set of physical conditions. The Pacific, therefore, becomes more than an ocean. It becomes a measure against which human knowledge is compared. Its depths remind us that the visible surface of the Earth represents only one chapter of a much larger story, while beneath it extends another world operating according to equally ancient principles. The chemistry, geology, and biology hidden below continue without ceremony, shaped by forces that neither require recognition nor announce their existence. Seen from that wider perspective, the deepest Pacific offers neither reassurance nor menace. It offers proportion. It reveals a planet whose unseen realms remain vastly greater than the places already explored, and whose living systems continue to exceed expectations whenever another small window is opened into the darkness below. The final descent is measured not simply by depth, but by the gradual removal of everything once believed essential. Layer after layer, the familiar world falls away until almost nothing remains except rock, water, and immense pressure. The floor of the Mariana Trench is not merely the lowest place in the ocean. It is the point on the surface of the Earth that lies furthest from nearly every condition long associated with abundant life. There is no sunlight to guide the passing of time. There is no warmth carried downward from the surface. Photosynthesis has no role to play. The crushing weight of the ocean presses upon every molecule with extraordinary force, while the water remains between 1 degree Celsius or 34 degrees Fahrenheit and 4 degrees Celsius or 39 degrees Fahrenheit, year after year, across spans of time that reach beyond the existence of humanity itself. Darkness has no softer edge here. It exists without variation, uninterrupted across every direction. Yet the deepest floor is not empty. A snailfish, shaped through countless generations, moves across the sediment with tissues enriched by trimethylamine oxide, a molecular compound that preserves the delicate structure of proteins beneath pressures that would otherwise distort them beyond function. Nearby, amphipods gather wherever nourishment arrives after its immense journey from the world above. A single-celled xenophyophore, broad enough to rest within an open hand, constructs an intricate shelter from grains of sediment, fragments of mineral, and delicate skeletal remains, while storing uranium and other heavy metals in concentrations that would overwhelm many familiar organisms. Within that living structure, smaller creatures find refuge, transforming one enormous cell into a home shared by many lives. Even beneath the sediment itself, activity continues beyond ordinary perception. Bacteria break apart ancient organic material, that has settled through the water over immense spans of time. Viruses enter those bacterial cells, directing cycles of replication that unfold beneath nearly 11 kilometers, that is nearly 683 miles, of seawater. Each microscopic exchange supports another, forming an uninterrupted chain that reaches upward through scavengers, predators, and every remarkable organism encountered throughout this journey. The entire community persists through patience rather than abundance, sustained by the slow arrival of material descending from distant waters far above. The significance of this place has never rested upon danger. The inhabitants of the hadal depths possess no awareness of humanity. They neither pursue nor avoid us. Their existence has unfolded independently, shaped only by geology, chemistry, and evolution acting across immense periods of time. Every adaptation belongs to that environment alone, refined until it became neither extraordinary nor unusual within the place that produced it. Seen together, the milestones of the descent form a gradual rewriting of expectation. Beyond 200 meters, which is about 124 miles, sunlight disappears. Beyond 1,000 meters, which is about 621 miles, the human body cannot survive unaided beneath the surrounding pressure. Beyond 2,500 meters, that is nearly 1,553 miles, thriving ecosystems no longer depend upon photosynthesis. Beyond 6,000 meters, that is nearly 3,728 miles, familiar surface biology yields to organisms transformed by conditions unlike those experienced anywhere above. Near 8,336 meters, that is nearly 5,181 miles, a vertebrate reaches the outer chemical boundary presently understood for its kind. At 10,984 meters, that is nearly 6,824 miles, life continues still. The Pacific, therefore, offers something greater than a collection of remarkable creatures. It reveals that many of the rules, often regarded as universal, are, in truth, local expressions shaped by the surface alone. Beneath that familiar layer, another world has followed the same evolutionary principles while arriving at profoundly different answers. Across immense darkness and immeasurable patience, life has continued writing those answers for millions of years, asking for nothing except the chance to endure.